Welcome back to the Capitol Confidential podcast from the Times-Union and the Hearst Corporation. I'm Dan Clark, author of the Capitol Confidential newsletter. Our guest this week needs no introduction. It's Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie, who's been crisscrossing the state on his annual summer tour. Speaker, thanks for being on the pod.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. You're going around the state. I'm going to ask you a really controversial question.
Sure.
Is there one area that you look forward to most visiting every year?
Listen, I'm a politician, so I'm going to answer this the correct way. Every part of this state is beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
But I would say that the part of the state that I feel like I've loved the most was Ithaca in the Gorges, or the Gorges. I would say that's probably, in all my years of touring, it's probably been my favorite place to go.
Do you drink the wine out in the Finger Lakes?
I don't really drink alcohol anymore, so...
It's okay. The wine's disgusting.
Oh, okay. Well, you saved me from that now.
Is there a particular food item around the state that you love? Like between these garbage plates and chicken riggies and everything?
Well, I was going to say I like the chicken riggies, except quite often when they bring them to me, they put mushrooms in them. They forget that I'm allergic to mushrooms. And I do like the Utica greens, which we found out was it Morelli greens? Like Joe Morelli's family started it?
What?
Yeah. Either Joe Morelli's uncle started either the chicken riggies or the Utica greens. You can look that up.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What a little piece of history of New York that we don't know about. Yes. I'm partial to buffalo wings, even though I'm trying to stop eating meat. And Melba sauce in Albany, the raspberry sauce for mozzarella sticks, awesome.
I do like raspberry sauce on mozzarella sticks.
Yeah. Well, with Prince, raspberry beret.
That is true.
So we're talking to you at a time that is really important in politics. We're talking on the day that Governor Hochul had Texas Democrats to the state capitol to talk about redistricting. Texas obviously is doing its own thing down there with their maps, trying to bring 5 more seats to their party in Congress. We are constrained here by the state constitution. We can't just open it back up. First I want to start with that. Like, how frustrating is that to you that we can't just kind of immediately respond?
It frustrates me a lot because in general, Democrats, we quite often, we try to take the high road. We try to be champions of morality, and then Republicans will come and they'll use every trick, tool, they'll Shawshank Redemption you. They'll just use everything they can to kind of play around the rules. Now, I think this is a byproduct of this president's approval rating is lower than it was before. I'm still shocked that we gave this guy a second term, he's not doing anything that he said he wouldn't do. But I think they know they are most probably, under the current lines, going to lose the House. So what's the best way to get around that? Go find a friendly state that, you can just, do, a gerrymander, and that's what they're attempting to do in Texas.
We have a complicated redistricting history in New York, especially over the past decade. For listeners that don't know, in 2014, we had the constitutional amendment to create the Independent Redistricting Commission. I think at the time you voted against it, right? Going on the ballot?
Actually, to be honest, I wasn't here. I was having surgery, but I probably still would have been a yes. That was something that, the House and the Speaker, and the governor at that point then wanted, which, even though I had my own reservations then, that, there's no such thing as nonpartisan. As much as people want to say you can't take politics out of politics, but can you be political and be fair and do things in a representative way? Yes, and I think that that's what we've tried to do. That's what we did in the last round, of redistricting. We tried, to be fair. And what happened in 2022 under redistricting, which is, a shock to me, the commission, failed to give us a second set of maps. So we passed the statute that said, fine, if they can't come to a resolution on the second map, we'll take everything that they gave us to use to draw maps. Unfortunately, the Court of Appeals didn't agree, and I think they didn't agree for other reasons. I feel like the 4 people who voted to overturn what we did I think it was an overreach of their power. They tried to basically legislate, because every other time there's been concerns, the Court of Appeals has sent it back to the legislature. For instance, that Court of Appeals could have said, "All right, guys, the commission didn't give you a second set of maps." They could have ordered the commission to give us a second set of maps. It says, if you don't give them a second set of maps, we'll allow the legislature to draw the maps. But what did they do? They gave a decision. Decision basically said the legislature had no right to do anything because the commission didn't give a second set of maps. So I just think they figured out a way to give it to the courts, and I wholeheartedly blame Janet DiFiore, who she became a Democrat, but I think she was a Republican hiding out in Democratic clothing, and I think she repaid the Republicans for all of the years that she was a Republican. There was no reason for them to reach that decision. You gave us that judge in Steuben County, who, by the way, was a surrogate judge. He wasn't even like a judge that was an expert in constitutional or election law.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so just all of these ways where they just totally just took the legislature out of it. And I don't think it's the court's right to decide to take the legislature. It's the Constitution says the legislature has the final say. But Judge DiFiore decided she wanted to have the final say.
Do you think it was her? I just don't want to get what you're saying wrong. Do you think it was her intentionally trying to swing it for Republicans in that round?
I would hope not, but I think she clearly didn't want the legislature to draw the lines. You gave it back to the lower court judge, like I said, from Steuben County, who then picked somebody who wasn't even from the state. And so I said, so if she wanted to be fair, she could have pointed out the weakness, which she said, which they believe, was that the commission didn't finish their job, so the legislature had no right to take it over. Why not instruct the commission to give the second set of lines and say to them, if you don't give the second set of lines, we will allow the legislature to draw the lines. She could have done that. There was plenty enough time. They moved the calendar, but their decision clearly was to take the legislature out. So if you take a Democratic supermajority legislature out of drawing of the maps, I can only conclude she knew that she was helping Republicans.
I think that she knew that to some extent when she was writing the decision, for sure, and especially sending the decision back to Steuben County. And then I believe the judge picked the special master there. So that kind of a domino effect set everything else in motion. With the commission itself, it was deadlocked half and half. Good government groups will say, oh, well, we expected that to happen because equal number of appointees from each party. Do you see a way forward for the commission in the next round once we get to 2032? Do you think it needs to be changed? And we'll talk about the intervening years, obviously.
I think the problem of having an equal commission, right? You had 4 Dems, 4 Rs, and then you had a conservative, and we picked in, an unaffiliated person. And it turned out being a deadlock of 5-5. So what's going to happen? You're going to have the 5 Republican-leaning commission members wanting to draw pro-Republican maps. Then you're going to have the 5 Democratic-leaning commission members probably wanting to draw pro-Democratic maps. So it just gets us to a deadlock. So I do think we need a better way to look at this. And, I was encouraged to hear that the governor thought that maybe we should, re-look at this, situation. It's like you can't go 50-50 on this when there's no majority vote, because you're going to end up with a deadlock. And then we're going to have a situation where if it comes to the legislature and you have to have a supermajority, it's just so convoluted and complicated. And so I'm happy to hear that she wants to relook at it. I know our members would like to look at it. I don't want to speak for the Senate, but I believe the Senate would want to look at this as well.
Yeah, and I think that what she said today, where she said, Democrats hold a majority in both chambers of the legislature because the voters put them there. So Democrats are going to make the decision because they're the majority because the voters put them there. And I think when she said, if Republicans get the majority, they can decide what they want to do. At this point in politics, Do you see a need to kind of play with bipartisanship?
Well, I'll say this. I know this country is very polarized, but I have an extraordinary relationship with Will Barkley, who's the minority leader in the assembly. I consider him a good friend. I think a year or two ago on my tour, I even went to his district and we did some fishing. I think you can do things in a bipartisan way, but I think ultimately the majorities rule, and I think trying to come up with some quasi way of majority not ruling doesn't. The minority should always have their say, but majority uh, does rule. And then we have this complication where super majorities must rule, which adds to another level of complication. When you make these things so complicated, you can just be opening the door to having the courts be involved, and I don't think the courts really want to be interested or should be looking forward to drawing maps. That is a legislative responsibility. But we constantly, and we've had this, and this was, the previous governor, people trying to diminish the legislature's authority. And I think when you diminish the legislature's authority, it hurts the overall balance of government. Our forefathers, they didn't do everything right, but they got some things right when they understood that you needed to have three co-equal branches of government between the legislature, the courts, and the executive. But when you start to mess around with that balance, you can end up causing problems that can hurt democracy.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back on redistricting.
Sure.
Schoharie County Sheriff's Office and New York State Police Patrols responded to a motor vehicle crash at the intersection of State Route 30 and State Route 30A in the town of Schoharie.
The limo crash that killed 20 people in upstate New York on October 6, 2018 is one of the deadliest ground transportation disasters in U.S. history.
Things should have never been on the road to begin with.
How the hell did this happen?
The owner of the limousine company was a former FBI informant.
Well, this was certainly one of the most egregious cases of intentional disregard for human life.
It's a story of tragedy and loss, of negligence and consequence. But more than anything else, it's a story of catastrophic failure.
We just want the truth to come out.
If you're enjoying this podcast, take advantage of all the Times Union has to offer and support our efforts to bring you award-winning journalism by becoming a Times Union subscriber today. Go to timesunion.com/subscribe.
And we're back on the Capitol Confidential podcast with Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie. So you said that your conference was interested in taking a look at this. Do you think it's going to be a hard sell for anybody to want to respond to Texas in 2027 through an amendment?
I don't know if it's necessarily wanting to respond. It's in general, Democrats seem to want to work in a non-political way. And what I'm saying is I just don't know how that is. I don't think there's a single human being that doesn't have some partisan view. And I think when we try to mask, not mask politics through a nonpartisan way, I think it can lead to a deadlock. And would I want to have to do in, I'd say, mid-decade redistricting? No, but I think if, and this was the point that I was making earlier when we had the press, if New York, if Democratic states would have the power to do mid-year redistricting, maybe that would give, mid-decade redistricting, maybe that would give Texas pause, because the call that I assume was made to Governor Abbott was because they know it's not as easy for Democratic states to respond. So if we're all playing on a level playing field, which if you give everybody the right to go back and do mid-decade redistricting, maybe Texas wouldn't be so cute, because then Republicans and other states that are represented by Democrats would say, hey, you guys do that there, they could turn around and do it here. So this is just to me about leveling the playing field, where everybody would just, instead of, racing to be bad, this would just maybe be a race to cause everybody to be good.
It's like having your own check at the federal level between states.
Right.
And I think that would be appropriate, because the country is so, I don't want to say equally divided necessarily, but representation-wise in Congress, equally divided. So I can see that check being appealing to a lot of people.
And just think about it, the game that North Carolina played, when they switched 3 or 4 seats, think about that. The Democrats will be in the majority right now. There'd be no big disgusting bill. So this is, Republicans using the gamesmanship that they have. Notice they don't have nonpartisan redistricting in these big Republican states, because they want to be able to use the powers that they that they're given.
We have 7 Republicans from New York in Congress, and I know that you don't want to redraw maps to benefit somebody in particular or detract from somebody in particular, but in a perfect world, how many seats would you want to cut away from that?
And like I said, it's not about saying we have 26 congressional seats. In my heart as a Democrat, I'd like all 26 to be Democrat, but you want that to be decided by, the voters. You draw fair maps. And because I think the most important thing is to draw districts with communities of interest. I think that's the most important criteria. Could we draw districts that are, I'd say that the biggest criteria is communities of interest? Could you get more than, I'd say 19 districts here in New York? Yes. And that's what I mean by, if Texas knew that we could do that, maybe they wouldn't do that, because I feel like they're doing this only because they know that they can, and it's not as easy as the big Democratic states to do it. I think the only big Democratic state that probably has the chance to do it is Illinois. Mm-hmm. I know that California may kind of, put it on the ballot, but I think if the Republican states start to see that Democrats are going to, go to arms on this to kind of stop them from doing this as a threat that, hey, y'all want to do this, we could do it too, maybe it has everybody go back to doing fair maps.
Do you think it's like popcorn, where one state does it and then another state does it, and then it kind of like...
I think the Republicans have gone to the 2 states that they thought they could get this easily done, which was North Carolina last cycle, and now they're trying to do this in Texas. And the sad part of it is, they're packing, they're reducing minority representation. I mean, they're just throwing out all rules of what's fair in representation in this country.
You mentioned the one big beautiful bill, one big ugly bill, as you call it.
One big disgusting bill.
There it is. There's so much in it. I mean, so much in it that you may be able to address. Like, you can't backfill everything, obviously. Do you think that bill, well, how challenging do you find that next year? Do you think it's going to be a really difficult conversation, or does it make it a little bit easier that you don't have control over those things?
Well, I'll say this. On the governmental and policy side, I think it's a disaster. I think that, when you take, whatever the number is, $8 to $10 to $13 billion out of the healthcare delivery system in this state, that's going to cost jobs. It's going to cost people access to healthcare. Hospitals built this funding into their bottom lines. It's going to be, people are going to have longer times in emergency rooms. And so on the policy side, they did a lot of damage to us. But I got to tell you, I clearly don't believe Republicans polled these things that they were doing, because we've done our polling, and even, 68% of Republicans don't like what they did on Medicaid. So I think they've given us a good political bill, but they gave us a horrible policy bill.
Exactly. I hate that it's going to impact so many people. And obviously, and I hope it doesn't. You know, in a perfect world, Republicans saying this isn't going to impact anybody, I would love for that to be the case.
Then it can't be true when, you know, I guess when they did the changes on the essential plan, it was like, well, you know, they feel like we should only be providing health care to, let's say, Americans and citizens. But hospitals still have to treat those people.
Yeah.
Hospitals still built all of that funding into their bottom lines. So when you take, you're not going to be able to just take $8 billion out for documented and undocumented immigrants. That's $8 billion that hospitals won't have anymore. And so that's going to translate across the way. And it's going to hurt rural areas like Elise Stefanik's district more than us. It's already hard to get access to care, doctors in more rural parts of the state. And now you're going to take all of this, you know, this money out of the system. There's no way that this is going to have anything but a bad outcome.
Yeah, and hospitals, as you said, are already struggling so much in some parts of New York, a lot of parts of New York, I would say. I'm from a rural area around Binghamton, Oneonta, and our local hospital over the years just kept on closing wing after wing after wing. And they have an emergency department still, but they don't have anything else. And I wonder, you know, with this change, is the emergency department even going to be there in a few years? Because I think...
Or even if it is, it'll be longer wait times.
Yeah. I think what a lot of people miss is that, you know, if somebody's a citizen or not, if they go to the ER...
They still got to be treated.
And somebody has to pay for that.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, if they can't pay for that, that cost gets passed on to everybody else in the system that needs care as well. So... And I think that's why part of why hospitals have been so upset over this, part of why health insurance plans in particular have been really upset over this, because they don't want to be blamed.
Yeah, because even on that, we believe that people, even if you have private insurance, those premiums are things that are going to go up because people are going to want to have to start to charge more for their bottom lines.
Paisley is joining us on the Capitol Confidential podcast at this moment. Hi, Paisley. Well, you know, there's so much more in the bill that we could get to. And to be honest with you, I don't know enough about it, that I don't know the full impact beyond Medicaid and SNAP and things like that. Is there anything else that is on your mind in that you're really worried about outside?
Well,
of
I think those are the two biggest things. And as you take funding away from one thing, it can have an effect of us trying to now have to pick and choose, because if we do have to try to do some funding to deal with the cuts in Medicaid or SNAP, do you have to potentially take that from other places?
Right.
So it's given us that conundrum because you know, the federal government doesn't have to balance their books. We do. But this is the other thing that people need to understand. The fact that we're increasing the deficit by $4 trillion means every single person in this state, in this country, and even in the state, are going to have to pay the interest on giving rich people a tax break. I mean, this is unconscionable what they did.
Well, we're going to know the full impact, I think, sometime in the fall when the president's budget is completed, and we can do a more broad overview then, because I think then we'll get a fuller picture of...
Well, it might be a little longer then, because some things they did they put time starts on different things.
Right.
So I think we probably won't feel the full effect until next year. And some of the things I think they even moved past next year's election cycle because they know this stuff is going to be bad, but they really just care about giving breaks to to rich people. And this is one of the problems that we have in this country. This country is becoming so unaffordable. Mm-hmm. The amount of wealth in such a small number of people is one of the reasons why this country is in the shape that is, that everyone is saying it's too expensive. Groceries are too expensive. Housing is too expensive. Everything is too expensive because too much wealth is concentrated in too few people in this country.
Oh my gosh. You don't have to tell me. Every time I pay a hospital bill, every time I pay my energy bill, my thoughts immediately go to, how much did this company profit in the last year? And could that profit have been used to lower everybody's bills? That would have been great for me, great for everybody else. So, I think that's a conversation that maybe we'll have next year in the budget. But we'll see. Speaker Carl Heastie, thanks for joining the CapCon.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me. And to all of your listeners, continue to have a safe and enjoyable summer.
Absolutely. And if you want to learn more about state politics and state policy, head on to capitalconfidential.com. That's capital with an O. Thank you to the Times Union and the Hearst Corporation for continuing to take a chance on us. Jessica Marshall is our editor. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.